Hello and welcome everyone to the Solo Multimedia Podcast, where I give you my unfiltered takes straight off the cuff. And today I'm going to be talking about Ghost in the Shell, which is a film from 1995. It's an animated film, an anime from Japan, as you could say, I guess. It's kind of a classic. I'm sure there's many people here that will be very aware of the film. It's, pretty old at this point, so presumably everyone's watching this video has already seen it. But just to give you a bit of background on me, I've never been the biggest anime fan. Maybe when I was like a teenager, I was kind of into it. And recently I've watched a few classics, like I watched Berserk lately and had a great time. And I'm watching Evangelion and really enjoying it. So I've been more interested in some of the older stuff compared to the more contemporary stuff. And I basically, I essentially, I watched a part of it on my PC a while ago, because I've been trying to watch more films lately, as I've mentioned in the trailer for this whole podcast series. And essentially, I just kind of chucked it on because I was like, I know this is a film I should watch. Suppose it's really good. And I watched the first maybe like 15 minutes, and it really struck me how visually interesting and aesthetically appealing and like in a very visceral, vibrant way that the film was. So I kind of realized maybe I should shut this off and give it my A, full attention, and B, watch it on my big OLED screen in the front room, basically. And I got round to it last night, and I'm incredibly glad I did, because holy cow, I guess no surprise to anybody listening. Yeah, the film's incredible. I'm kind of a little bit shell-shocked, I guess you could say, that I've enjoyed it as much as it has. So for those who don't know, like I said, this is an old Japanese anime in the realm of classics. It sits in the cyberpunk genre. It's described as a neo-noir because essentially you have kind of like some government agents. Like you have the main character is a cyborg, a female cyborg, and she has a partner, and they're both kind of. It seems like they're fairly. I wouldn't say like secret services as such, but they're definitely like high-ranking government agents, and the story follows them essentially trying to track down a hacker known as Puppet Master. And first things first that I'll say is the film is incredibly short. It's only 82 minutes, and I actually do kind of wish it was a bit longer, because in that time, it really feels like they explore so many interesting ideas, and this world is just such a cool world to really sink into that I just kind of wish it was perhaps a little bit more. But I mean, I guess I should just talk about what it does well, because it does so much well. The first thing, and the most easy to talk about, is the audio visual component. So the film looks great. It has the same quality that a lot of old anime does. If you've seen any old anime, you're gonna recognize a lot of the art style will be recognizable to you, I guess I'll say. There's a lot of like quite vibrant colors. There's a lot of pretty interesting visual effects. There's a lot of very like harsh reds and harsh greens that are juxtaposed against these grey kind of like concrete building backgrounds that work incredibly well. There's not as much neon lighting as you might expect from something like this, from a cyberpunk setting, I guess, which I found kind of interesting. But I actually am glad it wasn't quite as neon as a lot of other cyberpunk stuff, because I actually think it helped it feel a little bit more, I don't want to say human, although that is definitely a part of it. I think it feels a little more human and a little more grounded, which I think works to the benefit of the film, especially considering some of the philosophical territory it ventures off into. But it also helps it stand out just amongst other cyberpunk properties. So this isn't like, it has a lot of similarities with something like Blade Runner, but it takes it down a different route, I suppose. So I appreciate that. And the other thing about the film is that the music is front to back incredible. It's all incredibly atmospheric, and the whole film, from a tonal perspective, is very atmospheric as well. It doesn't really, not a ton happens, which is interesting, because I feel like the pace of the film is nigh on perfect. One of the big criticisms I have of the original Blade Runner is I could not get along with the pacing. I found it just way too slow. And this film, I feel like, nails that. Not a ton happens, but it's also atmospheric and engrossing, that I was engaged the entire runtime. And like I said, I really do wish it was longer as a result, because it kept my attention the entire time. It felt very short, to watch, to be honest. And I guess I should go into parts of the reasons as to why. So, essentially, like I said, the main character is a cyborg, and she works for the police, and the person they're hunting is called the Puppet Master. And what you essentially find out, so spoilers obviously from this point on, what you essentially find out is that Puppet Master is an AI that was created by the government, who's managed to escape and essentially is now seeking political asylum and wanting the same respect of humans, because his argument, or I guess I should say its argument, is essentially that in every conceivable way it's achieved sentience, it evolves in the same way as humans do in terms of, like, evolving thought processes, it can change, and essentially as a result it's seeking political asylum. And the part of the reasoning behind it is because in this world there is a lot, because everything's so technological. One of the big points they make in the film is that memories can be completely artificial, which is a concept that, I'm sure you've seen if you're familiar with the genre. It's likely inspired by films like this and Blade Runner as well. But they push that concept really quite far. So not only do the humans in the realm within this universe, not only can they have completely artificially created memories, but also as a direct consequence of that, the main character has a ton of doubt on whether she is even real. And her partner essentially says to her that you still have human brain cells. You should know you're human, essentially. But she is incredibly doubtful because she recognizes that any human experience can now be replicated essentially perfectly, or at least as perfect as it could ever get, I would imagine, by machines. So she has no reason to believe her own memory. And this character motivation actually plays in perfectly with the central plot and themes, because this is what the Puppet Master pushes to try and get political asylum. He's essentially playing into this idea in the exact same way that, like, no person can really know they are a true living person, and he feels as sentient, as existing, as conscious as any human. And this is again, this is such an interesting, like, philosophical idea, because it's just interesting to think about and quite a headfucky, but just beyond that point, it's such a good, like I said, character motivation for the main lady, because she doubts her own memories. It makes perfect sense that she would, like, essentially. Sorry, one thing I should explain actually is while they're hunting down Puppet Master, he ends up in another cyborg and then gets taken in by the government facility that she works for. And essentially what she wants to do is she then decides, I want to go and meet Puppet Master. I want to, like, plug into his puppet and talk to him just for whatever reason. And I think that the way they laid out the character motivation of her not knowing whether she's real or not and having this kind of reckless abandon, trying to, find more truth, I guess, to some extent, that motivation works perfectly as to why she'd want to throw herself into the grasp of this incredibly powerful hacker who can, take an entire government building down just by being attached to it, essentially. So that makes a lot of sense. And then when the two actually end up meeting towards the end of the film, it gets really strange. Like, what happens is the Puppet Master then basically decides, or not decides, but tells the main character that he wants to fuse their two AIs together, because the one thing that AI can't do is produce offspring, produce a unique kind of a unique set of genes, a unique set of DNA to have a new generation that isn't the same. It's not a copy, but it's a progression, right? And by fusing the two AI, he explains that this is how he believes that it can be done. Essentially, it'll be kind of like you're not reborn as such, but you're transformed. Which is another concept they talk about a lot. So one important thing that this film touches on is the idea that as you grow up as a person, you change. You're not a completely different person, but your experiences make you not the same person as you were when you were, say, a child. And essentially, the two AI joining and creating a unique conscience is kind of what this AI wants. He wants to, pass himself on in some way. And yeah, that's pretty much how the film ends. The two fuse, and then there's like a whole shootout, but then they get saved, and that's where the film ends. It's a really odd place to leave the film off because they've just fused and they kind of go out into the world and like, I can't remember what the exact line was, but they say something along the lines of, let's see what we can do now, or they're unleashing themselves onto the world, I guess, to some extent. And it's a really, really interesting place to leave the anime off. I know there's follow-up films to this, but from what I understand, they're not quite as good, so I don't know if I have that much interest in watching them. But yeah, there's just a ton of really cool ideas in this film. The atmosphere is incredible. It looks great. I'd recommend it to anyone who hasn't seen it for sure. I'm kind of a bit mind blown as to how much I'm enjoying this. And there's also, even despite the fact that a lot of stuff takes influence from this, it still feels fairly unique because it throws itself so hard into the philosophical ideas that it's presenting, and the plot is so intertwined with those ideas that it really does stand on its own two feet. It doesn't feel like while there is a lot of corporate control and a lot of these kind of like huge bureaucratic bodies that run the entire city, which is all we see. To be fair, it's obviously probably more wide scale than just the city, or larger than just the city, but what we see is the city. And despite that, that's all kind of the backdrop for the philosophical underpinnings of the main plot. And everything just bleeds together perfectly. Everything feels like it reinforces each other thematically. All of the kind of minor little arcs you see all reinforce as well. Like, for example, during the film, you find out that the puppet master hacked into the what they call consciousness is ghosts. And there's another thing that's really cool. They don't really explain too much about the world. There's not a ton of exposition, but you can really understand exactly what they mean just from hearing the language. So another very unique concept they have in this film is they have a word for the conscience and the body you exist in. So a human conscience or an AI conscience is always referred to as a ghost, and they're kind of interchangeable. They don't separate so hard between the idea of like a human and an AI. You just have like essentially an operator and an operatee, which is the body, the cyborg, the human, flesh or whatever. And that's a really cool idea. But as I was saying, basically the puppet master hacks into an actual person, an actual flesh and blood human, and implants memories in their ghost. And this person then discovers that they thought they had a wife and kid who they were going around doing tasks for, but it turns out this person, the puppet master hacked and implanted memories into this person's head to make them run around and do tasks for him, actually. And there was no wife and child. It was all just completely created in his own head. So yeah, great film. Loads of incredible shots, lots of atmospheric shots, lots of really, really memorable sequences and incredible monologues. Really great character motivations. Loads of really cool ideas. There's some interesting symbolism as well, which I thought was cool. Not a ton, but a little bit. Hi, I'm just splicing this in now, which I never ever do. I like these to be an unedited monologue completely, but I feel like I had to chuck this in because I just totally forgot this was an element to the film. It's a light element, but one of the other things that I really love about this film is I really appreciated the tiny bits of body horror they chucked in. Like when the cyborgs get kind of torn apart and you see their, like, essentially their mechanical guts hanging out, there's something, it hits in a very unnerving way. There's a scene where you see some of the mechanical enhancements humans have. So like there's a scene where you see someone typing and all their fingers unfold into like a million different kind of spindly mechanical parts that can type incredibly quick, and it's all very unnerving. There's also a scene at the end that I won't spoil with the main character doing some hulkish shit, I guess I'll say. Really, really cool body horror elements, which I'm super into just in general. I almost wish there were a few more moments like this, but overall it was a great touch to illustrate just how almost inhuman some of the mechanical moments ended up making people, but it's still, that body horror element draws it back to humanity, even if they are like cyborgs and that kind of stuff. It does a great job of being unnerving and making a subtle point without spelling it out too overtly, I suppose. Really, really cool element of the film. Yeah, I don't really know if I have that many criticisms of this film. It was just kind of a joy front to back. I really, really enjoyed it. For sure, it's one of the best examples I can think of a cyberpunk setting. To be honest, I think this is a pretty incredible film. Maybe wish it was a touch longer. That's just about the only criticism I can think of it. But that's it. Basically everything I have to say. So thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the video. And hopefully I'll see you around in the future. Peace out.